Hello, welcome to Thoughts and Bolts. This is Pedro. The name of this episode is What the Aliens Want from Us, Maybe. As always, this episode is recorded one shot, unedited, uncensored. So let's get into it. What do the aliens want from us? Now, this episode leans heavily on the work of Jacques Vallée, specifically the book The Invisible College, what a group of scientists has discovered about UFO influence on the human race. If you don't know, Jacques Vallée is probably the world's most prolific ufologist. He's been in this since the 1950s. Back in the 2000s, he worked for Bigelow Aerospace under the OSAP program, which was the Pentagon's secret UFO research program. His job was to construct Capella, which is supposed to be the world's largest UFO sighting database, with cases going back to 600 BC. He's also a PhD in computer science. So he was able to create an AI that would allow the users of Capella to look for patterns across time. So this man is very serious and he knows what he's talking about. This book is excellent. It was written in 1975, and as you shall see, it has withstood the test of time. Now, a little philosophy lesson, not to be presumptuous, but Aristotle and Heidegger both taught us that to understand an object, you must approach it through its four causes, right? The material cause, the formal cause, the efficient cause, and the final cause. This wooden table was taken from Wikipedia and is a classic example that everybody uses. Um, what Vallée does with regards to UFOs in this book is focus on the final cause. So the final cause of a table is dining. You put stuff on a table, right? To find the final cause of an object, all you have to do is see what almost always happens when it is used, or what almost always happens that is good when it is used. Okay, so what Jacques Vallée is doing in this book, he's not talking about, metamaterials. He's not talking about the design of the UFO or where they come from. He's focused on what happens, what almost always happens when UFOs appear in the sky. What is the effect it has on us? So, a little bit of a psychology lesson. Cognitive conditioning was pioneered by Ivan Pavlov in the Soviet Union back in the last century. It explains how we acquire conditioned responses to what were previously neutral stimuli. So, for example, if you take a piece of meat and put it in a dog's face, the dog will salivate. That is an unconditioned response. It's a reflex that they evolved to do. Okay. But if you ring a bell, the dog will not respond, right? Because they didn't evolve to respond to bells. However, if you ring a bell every time you put a plate of meat in front of a dog's face, and if you do this long enough, eventually the dog will salivate when he hears the bell ringing. Okay. And this process also works on humans. On your own time, look up the little Albert experiment, something that would be illegal today. But basically, they took a little baby who had no fear of white mice and they gave him a fear of white mice by clanging an iron bar near the back of his head every time the white rat would get near him. And as a result, he developed a phobia of white rats. Now, in the United States, a psychologist by the name of B.F. Skinner took this to the next level and developed what's called operant conditioning. And operant conditioning is about um, reinforcing and punishing behavior. So it's a little more complex. So you have positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement, positive punishment and negative punishment. Positive and negative in this does not refer to morality or ethics at all. It's a mathematical term. Positive you add, negative you take away. So, an example of positive reinforcement would be when you give a fish to a dolphin every time he jumps through the hoop, right? If you've ever seen a dolphin show, every time the dolphin does a trick or jump through a hoop, the trainer will give them a fish, right? And that's an example of positive reinforcement. Negative reinforcement is when you take away something that the subject really likes in order to change the behavior. So let's say you have a teenager, and every time they misbehave, you take away their cell phone. That's an example of negative punishment. Um, and an example of positive punishment would be those electrical dog collars that people used to put on dogs, right? So every time a dog would bark, he'd get an electrical shock, right? Positive punishment, something he doesn't like. And eventually the dog would forget to bark. Okay. So that's the basics of operant conditioning. I'm going to leave out negative reinforcement because I think you get the deal. You can read this chart on your own. Now, operant conditioning also uses what's called scheduled reinforcement. If you want to read this on your own, go ahead, but I'm going to focus on interval schedules because that's what Valet uses in his book. Interval schedules are when you give reinforcement uh, to a behavior based on a time interval. So you have fixed interval schedules of reinforcement. So, for example, if I was your ufology teacher, let's say, and we had classes every day, Monday through Friday, every week. And let's say I wanted to make you study Thursday nights. What would I do? I would have quizzes every Friday, right? So if I have a quiz every Friday, I tell you I'm going to have a quiz every Friday, and I do have a quiz every Friday, and only on Fridays, what's going to happen? You're going to study every Thursday night, assuming you want an A, right? You're going to study every Thursday night, or you're going to study every Friday morning, okay? That's a fixed interval schedule of reinforcement. Now, let's suppose I wanted to make you study every day. What would I do? I would use a variable interval schedule of reinforcement. So I would give you pop quizzes. Maybe there's a week where I give you a quiz every day. Maybe there's a week where I only give you a quiz on Monday and Wednesday. Maybe there's a week I give you a quiz on Monday, Tuesday, and Friday. Maybe there's a week I give you a quiz on Thursday, Wednesday, and Tuesday. Maybe there's a week I only give you a quiz on Thursday. Maybe there's a week I don't give you any quizzes, right? That's a variable interval schedule reinforcement, and that would ensure that you study every day. And variable interval schedules of reinforcement stick the best. Now, what Valet does in his book is he shows a pattern of UFO waves, of UFO flaps. What's a UFO wave? What's a UFO flap? That's when, at a given time and place, you get a lot of UFO sightings in 1 year, right? That's a UFO wave, right? And he notices that these UFO waves, these yearly upticks in UFO sightings or or dips in UFO sightings that they're totally random. They look totally random. There's no discernible pattern. And so he asked the question, is this a schedule of reinforcement that we're seeing? And mind you, this book was written in 1975, so he's using, the years 1947 to 1962, right, in terms of the pattern of UFO activity. And he asked the question, is this a schedule of reinforcement? Because it looks like a variable interval schedule of reinforcement because there's no discernible pattern. And he says he asks the question kind of like, okay, let's just assume this is a variable interval schedule of reinforcement. What's being reinforced? He makes this note. With every new wave of UFOs, the social impact becomes greater. More young people become fascinated with space, with psychic phenomena, with new frontiers in consciousness. More books and articles appear, changing our culture in the direction of a higher image of man. Okay. Now, the question is he right? Is Jacques Vallée right? I think he is. And that's part of what I'm going to show here to explain, well, what do the aliens want from us? Maybe. Okay. I think he is right. I'm going to show that there is what appears to be a variable interval schedule of reinforcement spanning decades but a fixed interval schedule of reinforcement with regards to specific times of day. And this does lead to an uptick in the interest of ESP. And again, remember, this book was written in 1975. So if we assume that the aliens aren't changing their playbook, this claim Vallée makes should hold um, far past 1975. Okay. So any theory is only as good as the predictions it can make. So if we assume that the aliens aren't changing their playbook, we should predict that with every new wave of UFO flaps, every new wave of UFO sightings, that the interest in ESP and consciousness will increase. So let's get into it. The first source I'm going to use is a report from the British government, which was declassified. It used to be a secret document, but now it's declassified. It's Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon in the UK Air Defense Region, Volume 1. This is an excellent study. I recommend everyone should read it. It's so well done. But if you look at the sightings, the amount of sightings for the years between 19, remember this study, by the way, was published in the year 2000, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, in December 2000. So if you look at the frequency of UFO sightings from the years 1959 to 1995, and you just look at it, there's no discernible pattern. Okay. It's peaks and valleys, it's ups and downs. And there's no way to predict how many UFOs you'll see the following year based on the previous year. So it looks like a variable interval schedule of reinforcement. Now, if you look at UFO, the frequency of UFO sightings with regards to time of day, and they only showed on, from what I could see, from 1987 to 1990, you'll see that 70% of these UFO sightings are happening at night, okay, at dusk and at darkness. So it does seem in the UK study for the UK that the frequency of UFO sightings in terms of decades does appear to resemble a variable interval schedule of reinforcement. And with regards to time of day, it does resemble a fixed interval schedule of reinforcement. But that's not all. A Brazilian study done by the Brazilian Air Force, which has also been declassified. You can find these all online. It used to be secret, now it's not. This was published also in the year this was published in 2001. If you look at the frequency of UFO sightings from 1954 to the year 2000, again, it looks like a variable interval schedule of reinforcement in as much as there is no discernible pattern. Okay, you cannot predict the following year based on what happened on the previous years, right? 12% of these sightings happened in 1977, right? And 0.2% of these sightings happened in 71, right? If you look at the 1976, they had 1% of those sightings happening, right? So it's very random and there's no discernible pattern. And these are 662 sightings that they're using. So again, in terms of decades, it looks like a variable interval schedule of reinforcement. But in terms of time of day, it does not. Okay, in the Brazilian study, what is it? 77%, okay? 76, 0.8% of these UFO sightings are happening between the times of 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. Okay. So that's interesting, right? 33% of them are happening between 12 a.m. and 6 a.m. and dawn and dusk, essentially, right? So that's what you have, just like the UK. In terms of time of day, it looks like a fixed interval schedule of reinforcement. And that's happening in Brazil and in the United States using studies that at one time were top secret military studies on UFOs. Okay. Now, Google Ngram doesn't have a Portuguese function, right? So I can only look at English, right? But if you look at the use of the term ESP, now ESP, extrasensory perception, was coined by the father of parapsychology, J.B. Rhine, and he coined this term in the 1930s. And if you look at the use of this term in books between 1947 and the year 2000, you see a steady increase. And this pattern looks a lot like when it's juxtaposed to UFO waves is very interesting, right? You had a major UFO wave in 1947. That's when Roswell happened. You had a major UFO wave in 1952. That's when the DC flyover happened. That's when George Adamski started making his claims. You know, in the 60s, you had major cases like Valençol and Socorro. In the 1990, you had the Belgian UFO, the Belgian Triangle Wave. And as you can see, okay, since 1975, when Jacques Vallée wrote his book, with increasing UFO flaps, there has been an increased interest in ESP, or at least the use of the term ESP in English books. If you look at more recent times, I mean, you had David Grush, who was a Air Force veteran who worked for the NRO, and he was the NRO representative on the UAP task force. And he's a whistleblower with regards to the top secret crashed UFO reverse engineering program. And he testified before Congress alongside Ryan Graves and David Fravor, two pilots who had encountered UFOs. Fravor being the pilot of the infamous Tic Tac case. Um, they testified before Congress in July 2023. And 2 years later, you have this new podcast called The Telepathy Tapes, which only has 10 episodes and does not have a single famous person on it. What does it have? It has non speaking autistic children with very strong telepathy. If you haven't seen the telepathy tapes, you should go watch them or listen to them because it's an excellent podcast. Okay, so this person, Kai Dickens, this producer out of nowhere, produces telepathy tapes, and she beats Joe Rogan in the month of January. Okay, who at that time had the world's biggest podcast. Okay, again, not a single famous person, just really telepathic, non-speaking autistic kids. And it's really incredible because telepathy is a thing, and if you study parapsychology, you know that most parapsychological effects, most ESP effects are statistically significant, but not like these kids. I mean, these kids, they're doing telepathy with a 90% hit rate. It used to be that if, let's say, you were doing an ESP test, and let's say you did 100 runs, okay, and let's say statistically, you're expected to guess correctly between 1 and 5 times just by chance, right? Just by chance, you're going to hit, you know, uh, be, between 1 and 5 times, right? If you do like 100 runs, let's say. But these kids have a hit rate of like 90%, right? And 100% sometimes, right? And what a coincidence, right? In this time of UFO disclosure, where UFOs are making a bigger impact in the country and the world as secrets are gradually being revealed, you have this discovery of this podcast with these super telepathic, nonverbal autistic children. And so we see this pattern kind of playing out before our eyes. Now, if you look at the free study, which is this study done with questionnaires involving about 4,000 UFO contactees, right? So 4,000 UFO contactees from 100 different countries. Um, participated in the free study, and they answered like these long questionnaires. Um, Two of the questions are really interesting. One is, did the ETs give you a message of love or of oneness? And in 54% of the cases, the respondents answered yes. So if you're talking about 4,000 contactees or claimed contactees, and from 100 different countries, okay, and 54% of them say the ETs gave them a message of love or of oneness. The other question is, did the ETs provide you with a spiritual message? In 53% of the cases, the respondents claimed that they did. So that's very interesting, because if you look at this, I mean, what are we talking about in terms of ESP, right? We're talking about dissolving the appearance of disunity, right? What is more private than my own thoughts, right? And how do I dissolve this phenomenal experience of being separate from you? Is, well, you can't read my thoughts and I can't read your thoughts. But if I can read your thoughts and you can read my thoughts, perhaps at a very fundamental level, we are one. And so, what do the aliens want from us? Well, maybe they want us to level up, right? Level up ethically, level up spiritually, level up philosophically, level up technologically, right? And what I like about this theory, and it is a theory, okay, I'm not saying definitively this is the case. But what I like about this theory is that it answers a very pertinent question, and that is, why don't they land on the White House lawn? Why don't the aliens land on the White House lawn? Why don't they land at the Kremlin? Why don't they land in front of Buckingham Palace? Why don't they land in the Red Square? Well, we should be grateful that they're not landing on the White House lawn, because that doesn't tend to work out. Hernan Cortez landed on the White House lawn. Pizarro landed on the White House lawn. Why don't they share technology? Well, the Europeans shared technology with the sub Saharan Africans, and that helped fuel the slave trade. Landing on the White House lawn doesn't tend to work out for the culture at a technological disadvantage. Okay. And I mean technological disadvantage, and only technological disadvantage. Okay. So this kind of helps answer that question, right? Why don't they land on the White House lawn? Well, that's not going to help us very much at all. Okay. So it looks like things are working out the way the latest UFO whistleblower, Barber, is saying, in that they're teasing us, they're coaxing us to look upward so that we can look inward. They want us to look up at the sky so that we can look within ourselves, within the subjective, within the mental, within the conscious, and level up and realize the fundamental unity, the fundamental metaphysical unity that exists, so that we can be more ethical, more loving, and less threatening to them. So I like this theory. And, like I said, they don't land on the White House lawn, but they do seem to land in rural places with country folk, and in one very notable case, with school children in Rua, Zimbabwe. Let's watch.
Story. A large, brightly coloured object was seen travelling very fast above Zimbabwe, Zambia and South Africa.
I thought it was an alien, and he had big eyes.
Several planes saw it. The experts are baffled.
Rua, Ariel School, 19th September 94, 12:12 local time. Could you tell me what you saw on Friday?
Well, it looked like it was like glinting in the trees. Like it looked like roundabout like a disc, like a round.
Are you sure it wasn't a Harrier jump jet or something that the Zimbabwe Air Force
It was like
have got?
in a disc.
saw something silver on the ground amongst the trees, and a person in black.
They had big black eyes. That's all I saw. I saw a glimpse. They kind of turned around and stared and then went back into a kind of like ship.
I saw this silver thing in amongst this clump of trees with this one thing sitting on the side and another thing sort of like running up and down the top.
What does he look like?
His face was like this and his eyes were down here.
Mr. Mackey, you're headmaster of Ariel School. Tell me, what do you think of all this?
I feel sure that the children feel that they did see something. We asked them to draw pictures of what they saw on Friday, and after looking at those, I definitely feel that they did see something.
What do you think that was?
I agree that it could be something that we are not common with. But to actually say that it was a UFO, I would be reluctant to make a decision like that.
What did you see?
I just saw a glow over my chicken run, a very orange glow.
It was a helicopter or
No,
what?
it was just a big round wall.
Can you just tell us what happened the other night at Kariba?
We suddenly looked up and we saw this thing coming over the top of the hill. As it sort of came abreast of us, it suddenly changed from this glow to let's say two big red orange balls. Again, first thought was an Airbus 300 with the two engines. But then one thing we noticed about it was the lack of sound. In total, I would say about 14 people saw this in our group anyway.
They did tell me from London this could be the biggest story of the 20th century.
As I said to Tim yesterday, I mean, I do believe the children saw something.
Saw a door.
What equipment have you brought with you?
Well, Gunther is a highly technical chap, and he's made his own Geiger counter, his own metal detector. We're going to check it out and see if there's any radioactivity there.
Cynthia, what are your impressions after this morning's little expedition?
Well, I certainly believe the children. I've come across a similar type of thing in Broadhaven in Wales, 1979, and the British didn't believe it, although I went down 3 times, and it's very similar to the whole incident here.
Well, there you go. Right. If you don't know enough about the Ruhr case, there are a bunch of documentaries on it, which I could recommend. That's it for today. Stay tuned for my next episode, which will be about what I call mech theory. I have my own UFO theory, and I'm going to share that in the next episode. So stay tuned. Until then, peace and party.